It was a breezy Thursday morning at Jefferson Middle School in Birmingham, Alabama, the kind of morning that felt like nothing bad could happen. The sun rose steady and bright, casting long shadows over the cracked asphalt of the parking lot as school buses hissed to a stop and spilled out a stream of teenagers half awake, clutching iced drinks, backpacks hanging off one shoulder, earbuds in, conversations half shouted. It was the usual messy rhythm of a new day, everyone looking for someone to walk beside, something to laugh at, somewhere to belong. But not Trinity Hayes. She sat quietly by the flagpole, her wheels still, her small hands resting in her lap. Her gaze didn't follow the crowd, not anymore. She had learned early that attention wasn't often kind, and kindness wasn't always loud. She was 13, small for her age, her voice soft, her answers in class always thoughtful, and her eyes held the sort of brightness that hinted she saw more than she let on. Trinity had spina bifida, a condition she'd lived with all her life, which meant a wheelchair had never been a prison, it had always been her companion. She didn't complain. She didn't draw attention. But the world, or more specifically, Jefferson Middle, didn't know how to make room for her. They noticed only what they didn't understand. Camden Brooks certainly didn't understand her. Tall, broad, 8th grade linebacker with a jaw too square for his age and a smirk that was always a few seconds ahead of his next joke, he came from a family whose name was carved into the school gym wall for donating the scoreboard. He was the kind of boy who didn't have to try to be heard. His existence did the speaking. Camden didn't bother with open insults. He didn't have to. His strength lay in implication, in mimicking the squeak of her wheels when the class was silent, in stepping in front of her just long enough to make her stop, and flicking her pencil off her desk like it was nothing. He called it teasing. She called it surviving. That morning, Trinity had almost made it to the front ramp, the short concrete slope that led to the double doors where the hallway monitors stood sipping coffee and pretending to care. She was about 5 feet away when they stepped into her path Camden and his two shadows, Hunter and Mike, who laughed at anything Camden did as if his approval was a currency they couldn't afford to lose. They didn't speak at first, just stood there, arms folded, sneakers squeaking against the concrete, smirks curving across their faces. Trinity stopped. Her hands gripped the wheels. She knew this routine. She knew how to wait it out. Sometimes they moved after a minute. Sometimes they didn't. But today, Hunter leaned down and flicked the rim of her wheelchair, as if testing it for flaws. "You ever think about installing nitro boosters on this thing?" he snickered. Trinity didn't respond. Camden stepped forward, and for a second, she hoped he'd just step aside like a normal person. Instead, he grabbed the front of her chair and tilted it backward with a motion so fast, so practiced, that her body hadn't even registered the danger before she felt herself falling. She didn't scream. There wasn't time. Her arms shot out, trying to brace herself, but the momentum took over and the chair tipped sideways. She hit the ground with a thud that wasn't loud, but somehow still seemed to stop everything. For a breathless second, the world paused. Conversations halted. A few heads turned, and then came the laughter. It wasn't loud or long, just sharp, cruel. A few kids covered their mouths. Some looked away. Others just stared. The hallway monitor kept sipping her coffee. No one moved. No one helped. Trinity lay on her side, her elbow scraped, her backpack twisted around her arm, her books scattered like broken wings across the concrete. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She stared up at the blue sky and whispered something only she could hear. That was when someone did move. Amaya Cross had just stepped off bus 12. She saw the tail end of it, the fall, the boys high-fiving, the ripple of laughter moving through the crowd. Her fists clenched before her brain caught up. She didn't think. She didn't plan. She moved. Pushed through the circle of onlookers, her eyes locked on Camden, who was still grinning like this was his stage and the world his audience. Amaya wasn't popular. She wasn't the type of student who led rallies or ran for student council. But she had something else. A fire so quiet it only flared when injustice touched it. She dropped to her knees beside Trinity, helped her sit up gently, checked her elbow. "You okay?" Trinity nodded once, barely. Her lips were tight, her breath shallow. Amaya stood, slowly, deliberately. She turned to Camden. "Hey," she said, her voice slicing the silence like thunder. "You think that's funny?" Camden blinked, surprised someone had the nerve to speak. "Mind your business." Amaya didn't move. "It is my business." The crowd shifted, the way crowds do when something real is happening. Someone whispered. Someone filmed. Hunter looked nervous. Mike took a step back. Camden rolled his eyes. "What? You going to lecture me? Her babysitter now?" Amaya didn't answer. She stepped toward Trinity again, helped her back into her chair, brushed her off like a sister would. The hallway monitor finally approached, late and useless, asking what happened in the most detached voice possible. No one responded. Camden and his friends vanished into the crowd like smoke. The moment dissolved without justice, just tension. But Amaya wasn't done. What Camden didn't know was that afternoon the school was hosting its annual Unity Challenge, a statewide initiative about inclusion and team building. It involved a series of relay races and physical tasks designed to mix students of all backgrounds and build community. Students, teachers, and even parents would be watching. During homeroom, Amia walked up to Ms. Carter, her teacher, and said calmly, "I want to compete this afternoon. I want Camden on my team." Ms. Carter blinked. "Are you sure?" Amaya nodded. "Positive." And that was the beginning of something Camden couldn't laugh his way out of. By lunch, the heat had climbed and the field behind the school buzzed with excitement. Teachers placed cones. Students tied sneakers. Music blared from a cheap speaker. Camden and his crew arrived in matching red T-shirts, already bored. Then he saw the clipboard in Amia's hands, saw her talking to Coach Ramirez, saw her glance his way and smile. He didn't know yet, not really, but he would. By 1:30, the teams were set. Each had to compete in a timed obstacle relay, sprinting, climbing, balancing, and for the final leg, a twist. One student would ride a wheelchair, another would push them across a rocky stretch of field, baton in hand. Camden laughed when he saw it. "Seriously?" Amia's voice was quiet, calm, unshaken. "You're pushing her." "What?" She nodded toward the sideline. Trinity, wearing a navy blue shirt, elbow bandaged, face unreadable, calm, present. "She's the final runner," Amia said. "You're her partner." Camden turned pale. "No, I'm not. Rules say one rides, one pushes. That's the course." Coach Ramirez blew the whistle. No more talking. The relay began. Camden sprinted his leg like his pride depended on it. He passed the baton to Amia. She moved with purpose. Mike barely kept pace. And then it was Camden's turn again this time, behind the wheelchair. Trinity sat tall, quiet. He grabbed the handles, muttering something that wasn't quite an apology. The wheels jerked as he started to run. "Slow down," she said softly. "You're tipping the chair." He adjusted. They kept going. The crowd leaned forward. The cones loomed. A bump nearly sent them sideways. He corrected again. His breath came hard and fast. She sat steady. Then came the final stretch. Amaya shouted, "Let's go, Trinity!" Trinity lifted the baton and held it high. Camden pushed forward, the weight in his hands no longer a burden, but a responsibility. They crossed the finish line. First. For a moment, there was silence, not from shock, from recognition. The teachers clapped, then the students, then everyone. Camden didn't smirk. He didn't speak. He stood behind her, hands still on the grips, stunned. Trinity didn't look at him. She held the baton up, chest rising and falling, eyes clear, and for the first time since that morning, she wasn't overlooked. She was undeniable. And that was just the beginning. The air in the auditorium the next morning was heavy with the usual sounds of adolescence, whispered jokes, sneaker scuffs against the hardwood floor, the crinkle of snack wrappers hidden in pockets, and the low murmur of students checking watches and hoping the assembly wouldn't drag on forever. Principal Gaines adjusted his glasses as he stepped up to the microphone on the gymnasium stage, his presence commanding but tired. After 22 years of watching assemblies blur into each other, he rarely expected much from them. But today, as he glanced toward the edge of the stage where Amelia and Trinity waited, he felt something shift behind his ribs, a quiet pressure, like the kind that comes right before a storm. The morning announcements were routine. Student of the month, lost and found. A reminder about hallway decorum and cafeteria noise levels. Nobody listened. Not really. Most of the kids in the bleachers were already mentally scrolling through their phones, even if they weren't allowed to use them. Then Principal Gaines cleared his throat again, and this time something in his voice made the room quiet just enough to notice. "Before we close today," he said, "we have something different. 2 students asked to speak. I said yes." A ripple moved through the crowd. That never happened. Students didn't just speak at assemblies. There was no open mic. This wasn't a TED Talk. Amaya and Trinity made their way onto the court. Amaya walked tall, her shoulders squared, her expression unreadable. Trinity rolled beside her, slow but steady, her fingers moving smoothly on the wheels. A hush fell, not the awkward kind, but the anticipatory one, like when a string tightens before it snaps. They stopped at center court. Amaya took the microphone first. Her hand didn't shake. Her voice didn't waver. "Most of you saw what happened yesterday," she began. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "Some of you laughed. Some looked away. Some of you said nothing." Several students shifted in their seats. A few looked down. She continued, her eyes scanning the crowd. "But here's the thing. Trinity didn't fall because she's in a wheelchair. She fell because someone thought it was funny to make her feel small, and no one stopped it." The silence deepened. Even the teachers were still. Principal Gaines, standing behind the podium, folded his arms and listened. "We talk a lot about kindness in this school," Amaya said. "We hang posters. We wear T-shirts, but kindness isn't something you pin on your chest and forget. Kindness is action. It's voice. It's risk." She turned, handed the microphone to Trinity. Trinity's hands were steady. Her voice, when it came, was soft but strong. "My name is Trinity Hayes," she said, and the gym was so quiet her words seemed to echo. "I've used a wheelchair my whole life. That's not new. But yesterday, I was reminded of what some people still see when they look at me." She paused. Her eyes scanned the bleachers. "They see weakness. They see someone who takes up space, someone who can't fight back, someone easy to forget." She swallowed, and for a second her voice trembled, but only for a second. What they didn't see was this. They didn't see the physical therapy. They didn't see my mom, who works 2 jobs to pay for new tires when mine break. They didn't see the nights I cried, learning how to get back up by myself after I fall. They didn't see the strength it takes to show up every day and still try. She looked straight ahead now, not at anyone, at everyone. What they saw was a girl in a chair. What I want you to see is a girl who got back up. The silence that followed was thicker than any applause could be. And then it began, one clap, then another, then a rising wave of hands and voices and feet. It wasn't the polite kind of clapping students gave when the principal looked at them. It wasn't even the loud kind they gave to the talent show breakdancers. It was different, raw, earned, whole. After the assembly, Camden walked alone. He always had people around him before. But now the crowd gave him space, not out of fear, not out of awe, but out of something new, recognition. He wasn't the funny kid anymore. He was the kid who tipped a girl's wheelchair over in front of the whole school. The mask was gone, and what was left didn't feel as powerful. He didn't see Amaya until he turned the corner by the library. She was sitting at a round table with Trinity. They were laughing softly, heads bent over a book. Just 2 girls, unbothered, strong. Camden stopped. For a second, he thought about turning around, but something in his chest guilt, maybe, or shame that was trying to grow into something else pushed him forward. He started, scratching the back of his neck. I didn't mean for things to go that far. I was just messing around. I didn't think she'd... Amaya looked at him. Steady. No smile, no anger, just clarity. You didn't think, she said. That's the only part of your sentence that matters. Camden opened his mouth, then closed it. He turned to Trinity. I'm sorry. For real, I was being a jerk. Trinity looked at him. Her face was unreadable. Then she nodded. I forgive you, she said, but I don't need you to be sorry. I need you to do better. Camden blinked. That was not the answer he expected. It wasn't easy. It wasn't kind. It was honest. Yeah, okay, he said. He turned to leave, then paused. If you ever want help fixing that wheel, I'm pretty good with tools. Trinity shrugged slightly. We'll see. By Friday, something had changed. Not the school, not completely, but something. The way a river changes direction over time, subtle and certain. A few more kids held doors open for Trinity. Some of the quieter students started joining her and Amia at lunch. Teachers began weaving conversations about accessibility and empathy into their lesson plans. And Principal Gaines, who didn't believe in big talk unless it came with a plan, set up something called The Circle, a new monthly forum where students could speak openly about what they faced and what they needed. The first meeting had 15 kids. Trinity and Amia were the first to speak. Camden came too. He didn't talk, but he listened. Outside the school walls, the world went on. But inside Jefferson Middle, a different kind of education had begun. One where silence was no longer safe. One where standing up didn't require legs. One where strength looked like a girl rolling forward with her head held high, and another girl who had her back. Spring settled into Birmingham like a slow exhale, warming the brick walls of Jefferson Middle and setting trees in bloom along the parking lot edges. The scent of honeysuckle drifted into classrooms through open windows, and the cicadas began their lazy chatter in the late afternoons. The days stretched longer, and the school buzzed with the usual end-of-year excitement, field days, yearbooks, countdowns scrawled in notebook margins. But something else stirred beneath the surface this year. Something quieter but stronger, like roots threading through old concrete. It began with a whisper between two girls under a magnolia tree. They had met there after school, Trinity rolling up just as Amia dropped her backpack in the grass. Trinity's elbow was still scabbed from the fall, but she moved easily now, as if the bruise had become a badge. Amaya sat cross-legged, pulling out a peanut butter sandwich and a book of poetry she carried like armor. For a while, they didn't speak. They didn't have to. The kind of silence between them wasn't awkward. It was earned. "So," Amaya said at last, brushing crumbs from her lap, "you doing anything for the showcase?" Trinity scoffed, soft but amused. "Yeah, right, because people are lining up to watch the girl in the wheelchair." Amaya glanced at her. "I am." Trinity raised an eyebrow. "I think we should perform. Together." Trinity stared at her, incredulous. "Perform what? You want to do a dance routine with me on your shoulders?" "No," Amia said, grinning. "Spoken word. You write all the time. That poem you showed me, the one about the sky that wouldn't sit still? That was just for me." "Maybe," Amaya said, "but maybe someone else needs to hear it too." It took a week to convince Trinity. Not because she was scared, though, maybe a little, but because she knew what it meant to be visible. Really visible. Not the kind that gets pitied or stared at. The kind that stands in the center of a gymnasium and asks people to listen with their whole hearts. That kind of visibility could split a person wide open. But in the end, she said yes. They met every afternoon in the library. Amaya brought rhythm and heat. Trinity brought stillness and weight. Together, they crafted a piece like a call and response, like the way thunder sometimes waits until lightning has already left its mark. They wrote about invisibility and attention, about pain and pride, about the way some stories get flattened before they're even told. By the time the Spring Talent Showcase rolled around, they had 10 minutes of truth memorized by heart. The gym was transformed for the event. String lights crisscrossed above the basketball hoops, folding chairs lined up in neat rows. The bleachers were packed, students in glitter and sneakers, parents with phones raised high, teachers clapping too loudly. Trinity sat in the back near the curtain, her hands folded tightly, her breathing shallow. Amaya bounced on her toes like a boxer waiting to be called, Mr. Hargrove, the drama teacher, called names like an MC at a hometown carnival. There were fifth graders telling knock-knock jokes, seventh grade tap dancers in sequined vests, and a violin solo that went just slightly sharp. Then came the name that pulled the air tight. "Next up, we have Amaya Cross and Trinity Hayes, with an original spoken word piece." There was a pause. Not silence murmurings, a few curious glances. Some kids whispered, "Wait, is that the wheelchair girl?" Others leaned forward. One girl clapped once, then stopped. On stage, Amia walked out first. Trinity followed. They took center court. Amia didn't hesitate. Her voice rang out like a match striking flame. "They told me quiet girls don't start revolutions. That silence means softness. That stillness means weakness." Trinity's voice slid in right after, soft but anchored like steel. "But I've seen storms in still water. I've watched thunder roll in on wheels." Amaya again. "They said I should shrink. That fire belongs to boys who run fast and girls who smile on cue." Trinity, eyes locked with the front row now. "They didn't see the burns I carry from keeping my mouth closed." Back and forth they went, their words weaving through the crowd like threads pulling a tapestry taut. "I've been invisible and unavoidable," Trinity said. I've been a punchline and a question mark. But now I am the period at the end of your assumptions. There was no music, no lights, just two voices, one standing, one seated, both taking up space without apology. The gym was frozen. No coughs, no fidgeting. Even the teachers were still. The janitor paused mid-sweep at the far door. Mr. Hargrove wiped his glasses with the hem of his sweater. Camden sat in the bleachers beside his younger brother, who leaned forward with his chin in his hands. When it ended, there was no immediate eruption. Just a beat, a heartbeat, a collective inhale. Then the applause came, thunderous, relentless, real. Trinity's mother stood in the back, both hands over her mouth. Her eyes were wet. Principal Gaines, seated beside the superintendent, cleared his throat a little too loudly and muttered something about dust. As Trinity and Amaya rolled off stage together, Amaya grinned, flushed with pride. Trinity's hands were shaken, but her smile was quiet, internal, like something unfolding inside her chest. Camden didn't clap right away. He just watched. His little brother nudged him. "That was cool," the boy whispered. Camden nodded, slowly. "Yeah, it was." The last week of school passed in a blur locker cleanouts, field day, inside jokes scrawled in yearbooks. The air was thick with impending goodbyes. People didn't forget. The performance had echoed through hallways. Teachers played it during homeroom. Ms. Carter had them write reflections on what it means to be seen. The conversation didn't fade. It grew. On the final day, Camden approached Trinity in the library. She was shelving a stack of books for extra credit. He stood awkwardly, hands stuffed in his hoodie pockets. "I heard you're going to Washington High next year," he said. She glanced at him. "Yeah, their special ed program's stronger." He nodded. "You're going to crush it." She didn't say thank you. She just smiled. That was enough. Amaya would stay behind at Jefferson. They wouldn't see each other in the hallway anymore. But something between them felt permanent, etched in chalk and applause and memory. They made a pact. Check in every Sunday. Keep writing. Keep pushing. Never let silence grow where truth belonged. Over the summer, Trinity and her mother took a road trip to Selma. They crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge together, her wheels humming against the hot pavement. Her mother told stories of her grandfather who had marched that very bridge in '65 and how courage didn't always roar. Sometimes it rolled. Back at Jefferson, Principal Gaines offered Amia the role of student co-leader for the school's first diversity council. "We need students with vision," he said, "with voice, and with follow-through." Amaya said yes. She already had ideas, peer mentorships, restorative circles, hallway poster redesigns, a new monthly campaign called Visible Voices. The work wasn't finished, but the movement had begun. Fall came early to Birmingham, or maybe it just felt that way. The last of the summer haze was swept up by back-to-school shopping lists and freshly sharpened pencils. Students returned with taller frames, new shoes, and stories of beach trips and summer camp romances. The school building was the same brick, same fluorescent buzz, same scuffed hallway tiles, but something deeper had changed. Jefferson Middle School no longer felt like a place where silence lived. It felt like a place where stories could breathe. Amaya walked through the halls with a new kind of presence. Not louder, not flashier, just more rooted. She wore her hair in braids now, wrapped with gold thread, and carried a folder everywhere labeled Council Notes. The Diversity Council had launched in the corner of room 204 with 5 students and a box of donated markers. By mid-October, they had 23 members and had already hosted 2 dialogue circles, one lunchtime workshop on ableism, and a mural brainstorming session. Amayi didn't just lead. She listened. She invited. She remembered what it felt like to be invisible, and she made sure no one else had to feel that way if she could help it. Meanwhile, over at Washington High School, Trinity's world expanded like a canvas unfurling. The school had wider ramps, elevators that worked, and teachers who didn't blink twice when she raised her hand. But what changed her most wasn't the building, it was the poetry club. A senior named Lillian, with lime green hair and 3 piercings in each ear, pulled Trinity aside after her first open mic and said, "You're not just good, you're necessary." It took Trinity a few days to believe that, but when she did, she started writing more. About stillness, about motion, about how falling in front of a crowd taught her more than any textbook ever could. Every Sunday, without fail, Amia and Trinity FaceTimed. Sometimes they talked about school drama, annoying teachers, or books. Other times they sat in silence while they wrote, both girls leaning into the quiet like it was sacred. They edited each other's poems, pitched ideas for videos, even debated whether to start a YouTube channel. One night, Amaya read aloud a new piece she had written about fear. Trinity cried, not because it was sad, but because it was true. Back at Jefferson, Principal Gaines approved the mural project. The art club took the lead, with Amia guiding the vision. The wall above the main hallway lockers transformed over 2 weeks. First came a primer coat of stark white, then outlines drawn with chalk. Students painted side by side, some in silence, some humming to themselves. The mural depicted 2 girls, one standing, one seated, both facing forward with their eyes bold and unflinching. Above their heads, in vivid block letters, the words, "Respect doesn't ask permission." No plaque, no dedication, just truth. The mural wasn't magic. It didn't erase bullying. It didn't fix every blind spot or bandage every scar. But it was a start, a declaration. And sometimes declarations echo louder than speeches ever could. By winter, the circle meetings had grown. They weren't just for issues anymore. They were spaces for stories. Stories about identity, home life, anxiety, heritage, love, loss, joy. Some kids cried, some never spoke, some just came to listen. The gym teacher showed up once, unannounced, and ended up staying for the entire session, eyes wide as students shared things he said he never would have guessed. One Friday afternoon, the council hosted a guest speaker, a young disability rights activist named Darius Green, who arrived in a sleek, motorized wheelchair and wore neon sneakers that blinked when he moved. He talked about visibility, bias, and systems. He also talked about falling literally and metaphorically. "When I was 13, he said, a kid shoved me on the stairs because I was too slow. I fractured 2 ribs. The worst part wasn't the pain, it was the silence afterward. Nobody said anything. Nobody stopped him. That's when I realized the world doesn't change from the top down. It changes when ordinary people stop pretending they didn't see." Amia and Trinity watched that clip again later on FaceTime. Trinity leaned back in bed, a hot water bottle on her knees, smiling faintly. "He gets it," she said. "Yeah," Amaya whispered. "He does." By spring, Washington High hosted its own showcase. Trinity was invited to headline the open mic night. She wore a navy blue shirt with a quote from their Jefferson performance across the back. Before stepping on stage, she sent Amia a photo of her palm holding a small paper note. It read, "Rise with me." On the night of the performance, Trinity rolled onto stage under a single spotlight. The auditorium was packed. She waited for the silence to settle, then began. "I've been a ghost in hallways, a bump in the path, a name people forgot. But I learned that quiet doesn't mean gone, and being knocked down isn't the same as staying down." By the end of her piece, the room was on its feet. That same week, Jefferson announced its first Student Voice Week, 5 days dedicated to student-led programming. One morning during announcements, Principal Gaines paused and smiled, holding up a new plaque. "This school has just received a statewide award for inclusive programming and student innovation. And we have our students to thank for that, especially the ones who never asked for applause but showed up anyway." He didn't name names. He didn't need to. In room 204, Amia sat in the corner by the window, watching sunlight hit the mural outside. A freshman slid into the seat beside her. "I think I wanted to share next week," the girl whispered, nervous. Amaya smiled. "Then you will." Years passed. The mural faded a little. The lockers were repainted. The chairs in room 204 were replaced with newer ones. But the story lingered. Teachers pointed to the mural during orientation. Students passed down the story like legend. The girl who was knocked over. The girl who stood up. And how they changed everything. Trinity became a published poet before she turned 19. Her first book opened with a dedication. To the ones who said nothing, and to the ones who finally spoke. Amia became a youth organizer. She ran workshops, led marches, and one day returned to Jefferson as a keynote speaker. She wore a bracelet that Trinity had made by hand beads spelling out the word "loud." On that visit, she stood under the mural again, eyes wet with memory. A student approached her, a sixth grader with wide eyes and frizzy hair. "Are you the girl from the story?" Amaya knelt beside her. "Which story?" "The one where strength didn't yell, it just rose." Amaya smiled. "Yeah, that one." They stood there for a moment. Two girls, one story, 1,000 possibilities, because strength, real strength, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it rolls, sometimes it waits, and sometimes, when the world is watching, it rises together.